Take care.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Bill. Thank you as well.
It's a voice that has long echoed in this chamber. Just a little catch up with Michael Fair, which always is a nice way to start the day. Yeah, exactly. It's, yeah. Yeah, I had to hold him to the 5 minutes. Good morning and welcome back to the continuing Monday Council meeting. As you'll recall, we actually finished up a little bit early on all the other items and then postponed a couple of items here pending federal budget analysis. So if memory serves, we still have 6.5 and 6.9 to deal with today. So, and it may, the order may be tricky too. But it's probably best to start with 6.5 anyway and get that context, and then if the other issue comes up, we can see about cross-referencing it, or we can deal with them sequentially is probably the good default, unless something changes. So, sorry for talking out loud there while I try to reconcile that. Let's roll call now to see who's with us this morning. Councillor McKean.
Good morning, and if you held Michael Fair to 5 minutes, you're a miracle worker.
Councillor Nicol.
Amen to that, Councillor McKean. Good morning.
Councillor Paquette.
Good morning.
Yeah, I suppose Councillor Nicol is the only member of council who actually served at the same time with Councillor Fair. So, Councillor Walters.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Banga.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Cartmel.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Caterina.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Zadig.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Essiger.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Hamilton.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Henderson.
I'm here.
Live and on deck. And Councillor Knack.
Good morning.
That is a full deck. Great. Okay, well, let's, unless there's anything else to add to the agenda or modify, we'll start with 6.5.
Good morning, Councillor. Today's presentation will walk Council through funding request for 2021, which administration is recommending for funding from the COVID-19 funds within the appropriated financial stabilization reserve. We will also provide a brief summary on the supports the city has provided to all Edmontonians since the start of the pandemic. So, administration continues to use the staged model and principles that guide the city's approach to financial decisions during the pandemic. These principles are still relevant and guide COVID-19 funding decisions. Administration's actions during the response and relaunch stages are intended to balance economic and social needs with public health needs during the pandemic's unpredictable course. We are also trying to balance the needs for the city to be fiscally sustainable. So to date, the effects of the pandemic on the city's operating budget have been addressed through one-time budget strategies with no effect to the tax levy. Longer-term effects are currently being evaluated. This slide is a quick summary of the amounts of COVID-19 funds appropriated within the Financial Stabilization Reserve and the balance remaining before and after consideration of additional funding requests included in the report before you today. Starting from the top, the amount of COVID funds available were $186.2 million, which is a combination of $161.4 million approved to be appropriated within the FSR during the fall SOBA, plus $24.8 million added as a result of the 2020 year-end results on March 1st that were presented on March 1st, 2021. Since that time, $170.5 million of the funds have been allocated by Council for various items, including the 2021 COVID effects, resulting in a balance of $15.7 million as of April 9th, 2021. Further details of the COVID items supported through this funding are included in Attachment 1 to the report. Additional one-time funding needs as a result of the pandemic have arisen for 2021, with certain costs impacting 2022 as well, in the area of public safety, support for business, and City of Edmonton occupational health and safety needs. Details on each request are included in Attachment 2. The City's COVID-19 Recovery Advisory Group has assessed all known requests on the basis of the principles discussed on the previous slide. Administration is recommending that 10.3 million of the funds in the appropriated FSR be used to fund the priority items outlined. The balance left in the appropriate FSR for COVID-19 purposes, after considering the recommendations, would be 5.4 million. If these are all the estimates that we have right now, and we are monitoring the current use of funds, such as the downtown construction grants and the opening of the rec centers. And if the funds are not used, they will be returned to the COVID reserve. There are certain items I wanted to touch on specifically in the presentation with respect to the funding requests. Included in the enhanced public safety category is a recommendation to fund the implementation of a UV air purification technology on City's Edmonton Transit Service bus fleet and DATS for a total capital cost of $5.9 million, with $2 million in 2021 and $3.9 million in 2022. The emerging technology helps to combat airborne and surface viruses. Its implementation may increase public confidence through improved safety and helping ridership recover as the vaccine rollout continues. The effectiveness of this technology in reducing the risk of COVID transmission is being reviewed and will be validated. Council's support for this being requested today is so that we can be expedient if the technology is proven. Administration will only proceed with the implementation of the technology if it proves to be effective in combating the virus. If the technology is not assessed to be effective, the funds will be returned to the appropriate FSR to be used for other COVID-related purposes. Also included in the enhanced public safety category is a recommendation to provide up to $1.3 million in operation support to the AHS-operated rapid flow through vaccine site at the Expo Centre. It opened last week. With Council's approval of Recommendation 1 in the report, the $1.3 million in budget authority will be provided to the Office of the City Manager to provide this support. But the total amount exceeds the City Manager's delegated authority to enter into this agreement. So Council's approval is required for the City Manager to enter into this contract in addition to the budget authority. So a recommendation requesting this approval has been provided to the Clerk to include as an additional recommendation when voting on this report. We apologize for the late addition and appreciate your flexibility. With respect to business support, we have heard from the business improvement areas and their need for additional tax relief. Administration considered several funding options to subsidize the 2021 BIA levy. The total BIA levy for 2021 is $3.4 million. In response to this request, our recommendation includes the proposed 50% subsidization of the 2021 BIA tax levy at a cost to the city of approximately $1.7 million. Administration proposes funding this amount using 0.9 from the existing Edmonton Economic Recovery Grant funds in the 2021 budget, because this is the unused 2020 BIA grant portion that was carried forward. And then the remaining would be funded by 0.8 million from the COVID funds within the appropriated FSR. Funding 50% of the BIA levy would supplement other available financial supports to the BIAs, those through the City and Business Association streams of the existing Edmonton Economic Recovery Grant funds in 2021. There is also a funding request of 0.5 million related to the continued occupational health and safety needs of our staff. This includes funding for technology support for staff to work from home, as well as logistical costs required to provide the appropriate PPE to our staff. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on the Recreation Centre phased reopening plan mentioned in the report. To be clear, this is not an ask for additional COVID funds. The reopening of the recreational facilities can be accomplished within the existing funds of $7.5 million set aside within the COVID funds as approved by Council in December of last year. Administration just wanted to share with Council that the phased reopen plan has changed from what was presented to Council in December. The original plan was to reopen 3 additional rec facilities and 3 aquatic amenities. Recognizing the importance of recreation opportunities for both physical and mental well-being, administration is now planning a staged reopening of all rec facilities over the course of 2021 and as appropriate under the public health orders. I would like to take a moment to share further context about what the City of Edmonton's support to Edmontonians and our economy has been as we've worked to recover from this pandemic. Not only did Council reduce our operating budget last December to avoid a tax increase for Edmonton property taxes in this difficult year, the City has extended extensive supports across the community. So the efforts to support Edmonton residents, nonprofits, and businesses during this difficult time have been numerous. For the business community, we have extended direct finance support through grant programs as well as easing of regulations. So this includes the Economic Recovery Business Grant, the Recovery Construction Grant. We supplemented the Expo tourism funds. We have waived business license fees, but also for business, we maintain the capital spend for stimulus. Also, to ensure that Edmontonians could continue to get to work or school, we suspended transit fares when it was essential for safety. Then we continued to operate all routes and schedules despite lower ridership. With respect to the vulnerable Edmontonians, we have the Expo Day Shelter in the Isolation Center. We had the 24/7 emergency shelter downtown. We also had overnight shelter expansion in the Kinsman and Central Lines and shuttle services. And we enhanced the outdoor library access here downtown. For community partners, we've provided some direct support to some of our partners, but also we maintained most of our partnership grants. And we also delayed rent for our nonprofit areas. And we actually introduced more flexibility for FCS-funded agencies to deal with their issues of the pandemic. And lastly, for all Edmontonians, we did last year a delay in the property tax deadline. There was reductions in waste services rates, and with our partners at EPCOR, the deferral of the utility payments, and now the introduction of the vaccination center. All that while maintaining critical services over the past year. So if that was looking backwards, but if we look forwards, the long-term effect of the pandemic on residents' needs and preferences, including how they use city services, is unclear. To this point, the budget effects of COVID-19 have been addressed through one-time strategies. We are currently assessing the impacts of the pandemic on our major service lines, particularly with a focus on transit and recreation facility usage. We have ongoing discussions with other municipalities to determine the approach to address the continuing impacts of the pandemic. And at this time, support from other orders of government is not known and is likely limited. Administration will return to Council in the fall of 2021 or earlier if possible with an update on the estimated effects of COVID-19 on the city's 2022 operating budget and the potential strategies to address those effects. It might include managing the impacts of COVID-19 in 2022 through one-time strategies and expense management, as we did in 2020 and 2021, or if there is sufficient support to rationalize permanent adjustments to services, we must consider ongoing budget adjustments. So with that, we're happy to take questions.
Great. I don't have handy who had selected this originally. I think it was Councillor Henderson though, so I'll go to you for questions first.
I'm guessing first right off the bat, we held off till today because we thought that there might be new information in the federal budget, but in terms of what we're talking about here, I don't think there was anything. Am I right in thinking that?
That's correct.
Yeah,
there was
okay.
no additional restart money.
But along those lines, in terms of our ability to respond to risk if there's unknowns that come up, one of the tools we never used, or we never had to use last year because we had these funds, was using our own FSR, correct? So
That's
we still have
correct.
that in the back pocket if there's small variances on this that we need to step in on?
That's correct.
Yeah, and that really is what the FSR is for, is that kind of emergency situation if it arises. So we don't need to keep we have a cushion still even if we move forward with this.
That's correct. It's the challenge of whether these effects are longer term than our FSR
Yeah,
can
if it goes
withstand,
more than
so-
one, if it's more than one time, we have a different issue.
And that's
Yeah.
what we're trying to monitor
Yeah.
and analyze, which is still unknown.
Just to go back on a couple of the detail pieces, one of the advantages of the UV Tech works is that it will give us permanent advantage. It's not just about COVID, correct?
Councillor Henderson, you're absolutely correct. It will have benefit during COVID, but also it does provide a cleaner environment for passengers. That's what the technology has indicated, but what we want to do
Absolutely,
is
we
due
have to check
diligence.
out whether it works or not, but in terms, in the future, even if we don't have COVID, for flus, for colds, for all those kind of things, it would be effective in making transit that much healthier for folks, yeah?
It should be beneficial for both patrons as well as our operators.
Great, good.
And I would just add, Counselor, that, it also can be part of our communication to transit riders to say we're, improving the health, and so it might be good incentive for, as we bring.
No, and I think there's a permanent message there that would probably be helpful for people. It's not just about COVID. I think it will help in a whole bunch of different ways. So, it seems, yeah. So, knowing that it has long-term advantage makes it that much more attractive. The BIA piece was a little bit puzzled because was it optional whether or not people took us up on it last year and that people didn't?
Yeah, it was an application process, and I'm not sure if I have the tax folks online, but they did not, we did not get the uptake we expected, so we just like to, that was earmarked for
Yeah.
BIA support, so we're rolling it forward.
It really raises the question of how, is it going to continue to be an application-based project going forward, or will it be automatic?
This would be automatic going forward, the 50%.
Well, and I understand that the BIs have asked for this, so I ask this question with some caution because I take their recommendation, I think, to heart. But some businesses have certainly suffered more than others, and I'm wondering if there's any advantage. If the advantage of the application process is you can give the 100% to the ones that are really in need, and the ones that are doing the same business or better business, I realize it makes it more complicated. But thoughts on that? I thought it would be worth asking, because I'm not sure this has hit everybody equally.
It's a true assessment that COVID definitely hasn't hit every single business equally, and many businesses that were able to pivot online because of the type of business that they have or do curbside pickup, some of them have had really good years. Have had a good year. So I'm not sure if, for the tax, I'm not sure on the administration side for the tax team if it was administratively burdensome and if that would be an option to do 100% for the businesses who are able to demonstrate that they have been impacted and this would be helpful for them. I'd have to, Ms. Pearson, if the tax team could weigh in on that.
I am actually seeing if they are online, because I know that there was administrative cost to this. We actually did have to
Yeah.
put more.
Well, I'm
into
just
this.
wondering at this point before, because I don't think that's a call I would want to suggest we make now without having the BIA's weigh in. But I'm wondering if the money's there and there is an ability to ask that question of them and see if there was a mechanism for doing that. I'm wondering if it's something we could pursue. Put the money in right now so we have a way to deal with it, but to actually ask that question of them.
We could engage with the BIAs, but they have been clear that they
I
are
know,
looking for
yeah.
100% waive of the
Yeah.
BIA levy. Their
Yeah.
ask has come in. If it was the will of council for us to go back and engage with them again and look at 100%, if it wasn't administratively burdensome for us, we could definitely explore that.
Yeah, my concern with that, Counselor, would be it's going to take a lot of work to.
I hear ya. There's-
The haves and have-nots, so
Yeah.
if there's a desire to go to 100%,
Yeah.
which they've expressed, I
Yeah.
would say just go to 100%.
Yeah.
But I think 50% is the right.
Understood, and 100% would double this number.
And also,
No,
you would be looking at more administration, because then you're assessing a fee as opposed to giving a rebate.
Yeah, gotcha. 100%, real fast, 100% would not be wouldn't double the number, it'd be another 1.7.
Correct.
Great, okay, thanks.
But the budget that we approved the other day, the budget adjustments include the 50%. Correct?
The 50% would be in what we approve here today.
Oh, it's in this one, not in Monday's. Okay, thank you for setting me straight on. Right, because it's one time. Got it. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, just to clarify, we're going to wait to chat the transit piece for the next item, correct? We're not cross-referencing. I didn't hear us cross-reference.
You can ask about the suitability of use of funds from the reserve for transit issues, including fares. I'll give a little bit of latitude on that, but I think we need to be careful not to
Yeah,
open debate.
I'll wait. That's fine. I just wanted to double check. Thank you. I think one of my only remaining questions, and this might be dealt with when we do the finalization of the bylaw, but when would be the appropriate time for the conversation around the delaying of payments? Because we did that last year, as noted in the presentation. That's been a request from some, particularly in the hoteliers, who are essentially still operating at about 10% capacity in most cases. And so while the drop in assessment and the subsequent drop in taxes is beneficial, these folks are some of those businesses Councillor Henderson was just talking about that are continuing to struggle and are scraping by.
So the deferral ideally would have been on the Monday discussion, but if we want to talk about that, we do see that the deferral creates some administration issues, Councillor Knack, in that the province hasn't deferred their education property tax. We understand that there are some businesses that may be hurting, but on the whole, we still have the same recovery. We had almost the same recovery rates at the end of last year than we did in previous years. And so some of the data that Tax, and they can jump in, has shown is that while beneficial, we did recover. People were able to pay.
Mm-hmm.
So, Councillor, I mean, we had a bit of a conversation discussing kind of collection rates and all that. So, we are tracking fairly closely to what we were previously, understanding that there's a bit of a delay. We had our deadlines for collection a few months later as a result of the delay last year. But the issue we'll face at this time of year as well as being aware is that our tax notices some pieces of our tax notices have been pre-printed. So there'll be some mixed messaging because it will say on the back of the notice that there's a penalty on July 1st. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to make that change today and we're really coming up to the end of it, we have to be printing notices within about a week here. We'll be changing the date on the front, and the date on the back will be different if we were to change it that way.
So I guess the question is, is there flexibility within your current authority to take those businesses that are truly that are not functioning, that are not able to bring in revenue, and work with them for a very specific solution? So I get your point that we might not want to change it as a full policy for every single person. But back to this point, there are certain industries that will make a difference. That will make the difference because they haven't been able to access all of the same supports that other businesses have. And so I guess I'm just curious if you have the flexibility that if somebody were to call you from, and I focus on hoteliers because those are some of the ones I've had conversations with. There's a ton in the West End who are, again, operating at most 10% capacity and have been for the last year and a half and don't have access to the same federal benefits. So if they were to call and say, listen, this is going to make or break us. Being able to pay in September, being able to pay in December will make the difference as to whether we continue or not. Do you have that ability to work with those on a one-off basis versus us making a broader policy conversation so as to not overcomplicate things?
So, Council, we do have a tax penalty bylaw that outlines what we can and can't do. So all penalties would apply to all accounts. With that said, certainly within our abilities to collect those property owners' accounts, if they're contacting us and letting us know there's a concern, and bring them forward subsequently for council's review and penalty cancellation if that's what they'd be looking to do.
I guess the question is, instead of you having to come back for council to that, I don't know if we're talking about 100 businesses that are citywide that are at this point, or 1,000, or what that number is. But is there something we can do that gives you some flexibility just this year, without you having to come back to council, to allow you to really go into that work and help work with anyone who is absolutely at that breaking point?
Given the way the bylaw is written, we would have to return to council, but it wouldn't have to be an onerous process, right? We could just simply return with those accounts and have a quick report that suggests that these ones are over. The issue is going to be, Councillor, though, really determining what that application process looks like, what that need looks like, and what the requirement around demonstration of need would be. Those would all be very challenging questions for us as a municipality to confirm.
Okay, I'm out of time. I might have to come back around. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Caterina?
Thank you. So, Ms. Pearson, on the business improvement areas, that's the area I want to talk about. So, is option one doable? Funds are available? Just run that through for me, please. If it would be a hardship for us to go to option one.
So if we went to option one, I believe it's an additional 1.7.
Yep.
I'm going to get Harm to give you the outline.
Yeah, so if you chose option one, which is 100% subsidization of the levy, you would need $2.5 million from this from the COVID funds appropriated within the FSR, as opposed to $0.8 million. So, yeah, another 1.7.
So, Councillor, just bring the balance down from 5 to that, so we do have the funds in the reserve.
So the funds are available there in the reserve. That's my question. So it's doable. We don't have to give something else up in order to do this. So with BIAs and that, and I've spoken to a number of them, especially the ones that I represent, Alberta Avenue, Beverly, and Fort Road. Has there been statistics on non-paying members that don't have to pay the levy? And I'm talking about charitable organizations and that have moved into the main streets of these BIAs, which then the businesses that actually pay the levy have to pay more in order to compensate for their nonprofits using the area or the street. Has there been a split or analysis ever made of?
Councillor, I think Cam Ashmore is on the line. He can confirm, but business tax, so the taxes paid by business improvement areas is different than property tax. And so if you're exempt from property tax, you're not necessarily going to be exempt from paying the business improvement area fee. Okay,
maybe Cam can explain, because there are a number of charitable groups that do not pay, including churches and that sorts of things. So if somebody knows the split there of that for BIAs or just in general.
Yeah, I don't know the split, Councillor. What I can tell you though is that many of the organizations that you're talking about, churches and things like that, are not businesses in the first place. So they're not actually on the hook for any business taxes.
Right. Yeah. No, that's understood. But given BIAs are a business area redevelopment that pay a levy, they have to make up for that square footage that those who don't pay legally, certainly they're off the hook. Someone else has to pick up that. We don't not redo the sidewalk in front of a church when we're doing revitalization and that. So they're getting the benefit. Do you get my line of questioning here?
Councillor Caterina, yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to.
Okay, that's what I want to establish. So we have the monies for 100%. Certainly the some of the commentary in the report on showing compassion and sympathy, that also applies to businesses that pay that additional levy to be in that area and to have the availability of additional services. But they pay for it where others do not, but they exist in the same locations. So if there's no lack of funds to do this and that, I know that they would prefer the 100%, at least for this year. And given their contribution over the last decades with their volunteer time, that they do a ton of work for us that we would not be able to do ourselves as a city. I think that this is appropriate for this year to give them that request of 100% support or levy support for this year only. So at some point, I'm going to make that amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so noted, Councillor Caterina. I think let's finish questions, then we'll get the motion on the floor, and then we'll take amendments. And I'll check with the clerks if we need to suspend rules or if we can handle them one at a time. So I'll get some advice on process on that, and then come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Banga.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is in regards to, let's say, first, this appropriated FSR, 186.2 million. How much of this thing is from other levels of the government and COVID support, and how much is City of Edmonton money, if there is any?
Councillor Banga, so of that 186.2 million, 158.2 are savings that we generated from last year as a result of receiving funds from other levels of government. So that's the amount that's in the reserve as a result of funding from other levels of government, 158.2 million.
Okay. And moving on to this active air surface purification technology, it's still not known that whether this process is going to be effective or not. Could somebody tell me when are we going to be thinking about, implementing it if it's proven that it's working? And right now, I mean, we need transit increased, ridership increased as soon as possible. So just kind of what are we looking at when?
Councillor, we have begun the initial assessments of the technology, and the intent would be to determine its validity based on some other jurisdictions that are using it, and moving forward on it as quickly as possible. We have it split out into 2 phases in 2021 and 2022. Mr. Robar is on the call and can provide a little bit more detail if you'd like.
Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Oh, the question was, we're looking to improve the ridership, I guess, ASAP. However, this UV technology, we're still testing it out. Is it going to be rolled out, or we're hoping that it be rolled out sometime this year or next year? When are we doing it?
Yeah, so right now what we're looking at doing is probably looking at an RFI approach. We would reach out and get a request for proposals. And there's a lot of these systems actually on the market right now, some proven, some not. We've had some really good conversations with the Toronto Transit Commission and Albany, New York, who did a very scientific study on the service itself and what that can provide for the bus. Really exciting results from that. So the technology there, it works. How it gets installed in the systems is different for each bus. So some of them have HVAC systems, some don't. And some of those can be applied to different vehicles themselves. So we want to look and explore which vehicles would be the best fit for the technology itself. Obviously do a bit of our own application study with different types of UV technology. And that approach is similar to what Albany has taken. That's shown the exciting results that we've seen so far. So we would hope to see some installs closer to the end of the year. That's why you see the money split over 2 years, and then into next year.
Okay. And my last question is about BIAs. And in the report, it says 100 applications were received, I guess, last year. And we only dispersed $22,000 in that. And there was a lot of money remaining, close to $1 million anyway, 0.9 million. And is it, I just want to find out, is it the process or is it like somehow we need to improve, I guess, people taking advantage of this thing, or but how do we? What are we doing to do that?
Ms. McCabe might
So-
want to answer. We did provide all the rebates that qualified, just to be very clear. We didn't slow down the process, but it is perhaps about the awareness. And so I think I could turn it to Ms. McCabe.
Yeah, Councillor Bang, last year there was communications out to the BIAs, and perhaps that the communications didn't reach all of the businesses, so we didn't see the uptake that we were anticipating. Another reason that potentially we didn't see the uptake that we were anticipating was that perhaps businesses were able to pay the levy still. So that's why the recommendation this year is to just do 50% to the BIAs to help with the administration and to make sure that it's equitable across the businesses in the BIA areas.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nicol?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Caterina's provided the clarification I wanted with regards to the option he's going to put on the table. Would this be the time to talk about 6.9, sir, or would you like to wait for that later?
I think we should wait until we finish with this decisions. And if there is a draw from the reserve on a one-time basis to do something in 6.9, that's in order as long as there's money in the reserve. So that doesn't need to overlap this discussion as long as there's still some money left after this
I'll click off then. Thank you. I'll wait for that.
Okay. Would you be so kind as to move a second round of questions for Councillor Henderson?
Yeah, so moved.
Thank you. I'll second that. I'll just seek unanimous consent. Any objections to a second round? Benny has a good question, I happen to know. So not hearing any objections, go ahead, Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, when I heard that we're not going to have this in until Christmas time, the first one, this is a capital expense. I think it's well worth doing. I think we should absolutely be doing it, but I'm puzzled why we're using we're going to have the capital budget adjustment coming up. We've got a bit more gas tax money there, and I'm wondering whether or not that would be a more appropriate way to fund the UV technology and give us a little bit more room here on money that's harder to replace. So thoughts on that?
Firstly, part of this is to address COVID. I take your point on the longer term effects. There are a lot of demands on the gas tax money coming up as well.
Fair enough, and that's we don't know, right? So so maybe the way to think about this is when we get to there, we could reconsider that as a funding source when we talk about that budget, correct?
Correct.
Now, there is an operating portion to this, so we would have to leave that piece here.
Well, there is an operating portion to this, and then we also are flagging that there's ongoing operating that will have to come back in the budget
so
later.
the ongoing, and ironically, probably the ongoing operating, if we're not putting it in, if we're not going to be able to start installing this till Christmas time, the operating portion is probably next year anyway. Or would there be operating costs in this year?
It's ongoing. Yeah.
No.
Oh, the other ones?
Yeah. I'm just wondering if there is going to be an operating hit to this year's budget. I understand it's ongoing. But
Councillor, there wouldn't be a significant operating component this year.
This year.
It's once
Next
we
year
get
there
this-
will be, yeah.
Yes, once it's installed and operational.
Okay, well, I completely support this, and maybe this is something we need to, once we haven't seen what you're going to be bringing us in the capital, so, but I think it would be worth remembering this when we do the capital budget. So I will take your advice right now. So, thanks.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question just following up on that. So if you could take the chair.
Will do.
Yeah. So what is I missed it if it's in there. What is the ongoing operating for 21 or for 22 on that? Or are we still working through what that'll be?
Yep, so the ongoing operating costs are $167,000 starting next year, and then another $333,000 in 2023, so around
Okay, so it's even
$500,000
some annualization in
Right.
22 at this point. Okay,
Right.
so it's ramping in, but you're going to bring that service package in the fall?
Yeah, we'll bring forward a funded service package in the fall.
Yeah, because it wasn't included in what we took care of on Monday at this point, because this hasn't been it's chicken and egg, right? Okay.
And having this here allows us to explore this right now as opposed to even waiting, which is one of the reasons we put this forward, because tying it to COVID
Sure.
and getting people back.
No, and I think that's a great from a sort of public safety and an OH&S for our operators and staff on transit as well. So, I'm for earmarking it here, but if we did a subsequent motion just asking you to analyze what the ultimate funding source should be for this, because maybe it qualifies for some of the new transit money as well, I don't know, the transit infrastructure money, which is a few years out, but there is some short-term transit top-ups as well, and maybe we can at least 50% this against that and free up some money for the back into the reserve.
We are continually evaluating our funding sources to maximize funding from other orders of government and others, so.
So you don't need direction to do that?
I don't think we need direction on that because we actually are doing this in the background already.
Okay, and if it does make sense to swap it, you'll bring us that recommendation?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, then no motion required. That satisfies my question. But no, I think it's a great idea, so. I will take the chair back and ask if someone would put the main motion on the floor, and then we'll go to Councillor Caterina for the amendment.
I'll put the main motion on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor
And does that
Essinger.
include the extra bonus number 3?
Yes, it does.
Ms. Pearson, thank you.
So let's just get that up on the screen so we're clear that it also includes the agreement with respect to Expo, where I will be on next Thursday, so I am grateful for that to get mine. So that is before us, moved and seconded, and Councillor, let me just check, Councillor Knack, did you have more questions?
Yes, I did. That's right.
Okay, let's finish all the questions, then I'll come back to Councillor Caterina for the amendment. Councillor Knack, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to close the loop on this last piece. So what I want to know is that would you need direction today if there were in fact businesses that were at that point where they felt that deferral would be that sort of make or break difference? Or do you have that ability through those conversations to identify whoever that may be and then bring that forward in a separate piece? So I just don't know. You'd mentioned the change to the bylaws. So does that need to be preemptive, or would that need to be after the fact?
Sorry, I'm looking to Mr. Zabo on the preference. I think we would like a motion. My challenge, Councillor, with the language about people that believe that they're hardships, I'm looking for perhaps some more
Yeah, so we'd
precision.
have to have some kind of criteria, Councillor. I mean, if you want to talk something about percentage of income reduced, they'd have to show evidence that their income had reduced year over year, say 50% of income or something along those lines. We get a motion today that basically says there's conditional tax forgiveness for those who meet whichever criteria we set. So let's say 50% of revenues year over year, and they have to prove that. Then we could go ahead and process that without having to come back to you guys if we had that conditional motion today.
Or if it's,
But you'd have to set the criteria.
And I was just going to say, it doesn't need to be forgiveness; it would be deferral. That's what I hear the request on. Not a request to forgive the amount owing, but actually just to be able to defer it, to pay it in September, pay it in December, something that gives them that extra flexibility.
Yeah, we could go. Deferral works too, or what we just say is the penalty is being pushed back or delayed for them. So, and it could be up to 90%. Income loss, depending what number you want to set. So I didn't want to preset your number there based on what you think the right criteria should be.
So, Councillor, I'm struggling a bit because I'm not sure that question's before us here, unless the argument is it might have a cost, but it's more of a cash flow issue, and it is an administrative issue for administration, but I'm not sure it's a one-time funding allocation question.
Mr. Mayor, it does have a net funding. If we forego the penalties, there will be a cash implication that we'd have to deal with. In the deferral last year, we had 6 million. We didn't, for example. So we'd have to analyze. I'm sorry.
No, that's helpful for me. I was just trying to connect it back to what's on the
Yes.
floor here, but carry on,
Sorry,
Councillor Knack.
Mr. Mayor. That's why I wanted to ask about it now, I'd like to, but maybe I'll do it separate of this motion that's on the floor and the amendment that's coming forward. I'll maybe work with Mr. Zabo to just find out what the wording would be, and then we can put in a number appropriately, and I can bring that forward after this motion is passed, or at least this motion is voted on.
Yeah, and I'll just telegraph that I think we want to be careful about designing the criteria for that program on the fly today. So So that might be best as a subsequent saying,
Fair.
figure this out and then bring us back recommendations for how to do this rather than trying to do it today, if you want to explore it. But
That probably is a more reasonable suggestion than trying to craft that on the fly. Yeah, so I'll work on what that subsequent wording would look like. Thank you.
okay, yeah, and if it has a reserve impact, as long as the reserve still got money in it again, that's eligible at that time. So, okay. Any other questions before we move into amendments? Not seeing any. Councillor Caterina, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the amendment is as simple as option 2 be replaced with option 1 for 100% reduction in the levy for 2021 on a one-time basis.
I'll second that.
Second.
Okay, I think Councillor Henderson got that by a nose. So go ahead and introduce it, Councillor Caterina.
I don't know how much more I can say about it, but I think that this is what they were asking for. They certainly have contributed over the years. They contribute in kind many hours, and knowing that many of the BIAs, and there's 13 of them in the city that will all benefit, that they have tenants or owners in their BIAs that are exempt from the levy because of their status, and that was never the intention, but they do exist, and more are coming almost weekly or monthly into BIA areas that would be non-paying members, and I think that this for this year at least gives them all the benefit of the doubt that they've all suffered somehow. The requirement of whether they can prove it or not, and application form of last year, I'm disappointed that that's all the applicants that tried to take advantage of it, given that the facade program was well communicated, and we did extremely well with $1 million a year being taken up by that program. I think that this is absolutely the right thing to do for this year, and fingers crossed that we don't have to do it again for 2022 and years after that. But this is a small, I think, a small amount for the city to show that compassion, not just to our vulnerable communities, but to our business communities that have struggled with their businesses as well too. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Caterina. Councillor Henderson?
Yeah, just really quickly, because I have some information on the second part of this, because I support this. In terms of the not-for-profits, I know that they used to be exempt. You know, I used to run one of them, a Theatre Network on 124th Street. But the BIA was always very supportive of that because they saw Theatre Network as a kind of loss leader for what they were trying to do on the street. So I think we need to be careful with that issue. I think a lot of the BIAs would see some of the ability to have some of those not-for-profits functioning on their street as one of the things that actually helps the street. So it's a much more complex issue than it probably appears, and I just thought it was worth flagging that.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. If you could take the chair.
It's my motion, so I can't.
Well, you don't have the amendment, so
Oh, okay, I
close
will
enough.
take the chair then, yep.
Probably stacked, you're right, but so in just speaking to this, I'm a little bit of two minds about this, because I worry about the signal of full coverage of this fee when we're not necessarily providing full relief to all other non-residential taxpayers. Except I remember that we have worked very hard for 2 years in a row to freeze the non-res tax levy. And in fact, functionally, the municipal levy went down a little bit this year against the rising education property tax. So I think we have sent a clear signal of support to all of our business ratepayers in the city about how much we value the struggle and are concerned about the struggles that they are all facing. It is a mixed bag. There are some businesses that are up and some that are down, and so I think our targeted support measures tend to be more effective than blanket measures. However, I think within this there is an assumption that our Main Street areas in particular have been particularly hard hit by the impacts of the pandemic, and that it's not all mom and pop businesses. There are, big chains and grocery stores that are doing well in our BAAs. And thank goodness for them for keeping people on the street and keeping some life and keeping some jobs and employment. But our hospitality scene, our independent retailers on those streets that are the places where we take our out-of-town guests and tourists to see, they are really struggling. And I'm continuing to hear that. So we may not be able to do this on a continuing basis just to manage expectations. But in a year where after shutdowns in the early part of the year and then another round of shutdowns now, I know there are a lot of folks who we hear about who are close to giving up. And so I think this move, which, to be clear, continues to fund the very important work of the business improvement areas, who are key partners in helping us solve patio issues, solve parking issues, promote the vibrancy, and who will be absolutely critical to the restart of these business districts as business returns to something resembling a new normal. And so, so this would effectively cover all of the work that they do and provide very targeted relief to those Main Street business areas, and send a very clear signal that this City Council is committed to supporting the reactivation of all of our main streets in our business improvement areas, and so much value the work, as Councillor Katarina said, of largely volunteer-based organizations, very lean organizations with small teams of staff who provide phenomenal leverage for our community. So I think this is right. I think it is a good use of some of the limited dollars that we have available to support recovery. And so I appreciate Councillor Katarina bringing this forward, and I'll support it wholeheartedly. Take the chair back and go to Councillor Essinger.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to support this. I think the BIAs really do that added value, whether it's improvements along their streets, adding events, things that they've done to really strengthen the city over and above their business work. I think what sets them apart, and I think the many times that they have written letters of support on many of the issues that the city is facing to other orders of governments, they truly have been good partners, and all that is over and above operating businesses. And I think this sends a strong signal that we really want to support local business, and that we really will come alongside and partner with them. And I think for the year, it's one thing. I don't think ongoing, but I think at this point, we want them to restart and be strong as they go forward. So I'm happy to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, thank you very much. I strongly support this motion. Specifically along Fort Road, I know that in that BIA, those businesses have been sort of hit time and time again. So they're going to be really grateful to have something that helps uplift them. And considering the fact that there's going to be a lot of road work and investment in that area under the bridge and so forth with the freeway work, long term that could be a benefit, but in the short term, it's going to be a little patchy. So this is much needed and much appreciated. Thanks.
I think we got most of that, Councillor Paquette. The connection's a little choppy, but
yeah, sorry, having some trouble with the internet today.
But I think we got the gist. So thank you. Any other comments before I go to Councillor Katarina to close? Not hearing any. Councillor Katarina, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a lot more to say, Mr. Mayor, on that. I think this is absolutely the right thing to do, and it sends the right messages, and it's well deserved for those main streets and the additional work that they do on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis all the time that we don't actually compensate them, but we certainly appreciate the fact that they're using their own time and monies and resources to do this and shows the passion that they have for their particular area of the city. So I think it's the right thing to do, and I thank the commentary from everyone as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote on the amendment.
Councillor Paquette?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Banga?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Cartmel?
Yes.
Thank you. And Councillor Katarina?
I think we can assume Tony's in.
Yes, for me as well. Yeah. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. We have all the votes, Mr.
Display the vote. Carried unanimously. Councillor, any further questions on the underlying motion?
Mr. Mayor, at this point, I think it might be more appropriate to bring 6.9 forward before we vote on this, or in case it impacts this motion.
They can be dealt with separately because an additional draw from the reserve
all right.
is just a
Okay.
different draw
Okay.
from the
Nope,
reserve.
then I'm
So,
happy.
so I would suggest, I mean, we could do that, but I would suggest we can deal with them sequentially. I just have one more question actually that's occurred to me. If you could take, oh no, you can't take the chair. So then virtually, Councillor Nicol, can you take the chair for a moment?
Yes, sir. I have the chair.
Thank you. Mr. Corbould, we do have some resources in here for, in the part 3 for working with AHS to support good outcomes at the Expo Center, and not just because I'm headed there next week, but from your perspective, how's that going so far? And is anything else needed from the city's side to expedite vaccination rollout?
No, thanks, Your Worship. It's going well from the city side. The only thing we need is more vaccine, and to be honest, we need more people to show up to get the vaccine. So we have a capacity of 7,200 people per day at that site. On day one, we started with 1,632, which was a positive step, but then it drastically decreased. And our low point was Monday at 136, only showing up at the expo. Now, yesterday, I think largely to do with the reduction in age for AstraZeneca, it jumped back up to 1,647, which was a positive sign, and I think we're getting a lot more bookings into this week and next week. So from our perspective, the staff are there, AHS is ready to go. I think the biggest challenge will be vaccine showing up and people showing up to get the vaccine. So, you know, we'd certainly strongly urge people that there's availability at the expo site every day, and we have not reached even close to our max capacity on that. And I know that there are a few issues with vaccines in the coming weeks, but we're anticipating more flows of vaccine in a couple weeks as well. So if anything, my message would be we're ready, and we've always been ready, willing and able, but we need people to show up and get vaccinated at the expo site. So please do. And just the HS staff are doing a fantastic job there, and as are the Explore Edmonton staff at the expo. So
yeah, I toured the setup before it went live, and I was really impressed with it. So thank you for that. And I wish I'd gone over for a walk-in yesterday at lunch, but I'll get it when I get it. So thanks for that. I'm glad the city's taken a leadership position.
I'll return the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Are there any other questions or closing thoughts on the motion as amended before us for the one-time COVID impacts, now inclusive of the full BIA offset? Not seeing any. Councillor Henderson, did you want to close?
Just really quickly, I would say I think this is a really good balance between continuing to be prudent, but actually getting the support out there that we need to get out there. And I mean, I think we've been fortunate to be able to have these funds to do that, and hopefully hopefully, you know, this is now getting close to the bottom of the barrel, so hopefully there'll be more coming, because I think it's been really, really very effective to be able to respond in this way. So completely supportive of this and encourage us to continue to think and work in this way.
Thank you. Please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thanks, Councillor Katarina. Councillor Banga?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Banga. Councillor Hamilton?
Yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Display the vote. And that's carried unanimously. Councillor Knack has a subsequent again.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and the wording is in the chats. Thanks to administration for helping to craft that. It'd be the administration returned to the City Council on May 17th, 2021 with options, May 17th, 2021 with options and criteria to defer the 2021 property tax levy for properties that is occupied by a business whose revenue has been seriously impacted by the effect of COVID-19.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Zadig. Okay. I'll just, on timing, ask, one, is that enough time for you to build it? And two, is that enough time if decisions are made to communicate it effectively before the deadline? It's a bit of a tension between those two.
There is. I'm going to turn to Mr. Szabo, who's more directly affected.
Well, it'll be tight. I mean, we'll put out what we can. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get something within the actual notice itself, but we can certainly advertise on the city's website, do potentially a little social media as well, which will come with potential cost. But you know, we can push it out there as much as possible, and certainly it gives council an option if they hear from property owners specifically expressing concerns, then you can direct them towards us. So that might be kind of the primary target you're looking for.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Nicol?
Anton, how are you going to make this work? I mean, how are you going to determine who's on one side and who's on the other?
So yeah, we have to set the criteria. So that's why we've given ourselves a couple of weeks here to come up with some criteria. But there would likely have to be some kind of an application process, and they would have to show the need likely in providing financial statements.
Okay. There is the question of administrative burden and the actual decide who's in, who's not question. So I guess those are the criteria you're going to have to address.
That's
yeah,
correct.
so we'll have to.
Okay, thank you.
There will be some administrative challenges with this that we have to work through. I'll be perfectly frank, but always doable.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Councillor Henderson, if you could take the chair.
Will do.
Sorry, I've just got a question. And then I'll make a moment for you, Madam Clerk. So on back to last year, we offered deferral consistent with the province on the province had said they were going to offer deferral. We harmonized to them. They delayed the collection of their requisition from us to offset the cash flow impacts of that.
That is correct.
Have they given that signal
No.
for this year? So if we were to do deferral, we would still have to actually give the province their money.
That's correct.
Even though we didn't have it yet.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's an additional, certainly a cash flow issue and also some administrative complexity to add to what you've described. What was the uptake? Because it was just waiving, but lots of people paid for it on time, and then there was some proportion of businesses who took advantage of the deferral. Do you have that handy?
I believe Mr. Szabo has that. We had that in a memo. Do you have that available, Anton?
Not right away here, but I can certainly pull it up. Just give me a moment.
It was not significant on the monthly payment plans. We do know that. We do know that a number of people moved to the monthly payment plans as a result. But I do. Sorry, just wanted to-
While you're looking that up, to the mover, this is strictly for the non-residential side?
Correct.
Okay, because we had, the option was for both last year, or was it just for non-res? Mr. Zabo, do you remember last year, was it both, or?
It was for both, correct?
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, because I know we had a little bit of shifting from the monthly, which I think, I can't remember the data now, whether we had more monthlies proportionately on res or on non-res, but I mean, the reason I'm asking this question before we, one, do a bunch of work on this, and two, raise expectations that this is going to happen, is to really understand how big an issue it is before we direct administration to put energy in this for a very small number of tax accounts, which are, if they're in serious trouble, that issue's not likely to go away over 3 months. So those are the premises of my questions here.
So I just have the general numbers in front of me, Mr. Mayor, that our collection rates were very similar by the time of the first tax deadline, 95%. And by the year end, we were down slightly last year compared to others, but very normal. And our collection rate was actually higher than Calgary's at the end of the year. And it's just on the monthly, our monthly groups, we only had 14 defaults on the monthly payments in September. The rest really did pay, and that's on over 127,000 accounts.
Well, and here's the other question, because it talks about a tax levy for a property occupied by a business. First of all, that could include a home-based business if we're not careful about the definitions. I assume you'll prorate for that. But strictly speaking, businesses occupying property do not pay tax to the city of Edmonton anymore now that we've eliminated the business property or the business tax. So it is the owner of the building, not the tenant. I mean, certainly the tenant may flow through the cost, but strictly speaking, the bill goes to the person who owns the building, not to the tenant who may be struggling. Correct?
Yes, absolutely. Always, the property tax bill is always with the property owner. It's the property owner's decision on how they subsequently allocate the cost to their businesses that they're leasing to.
Right, and many flow it through, and so ultimately it is commerce that gives the site value and allows for it to be taxed in the first place and for there to be means to pay it. So I don't mean to diminish the role of the tenant and the business, but we do not assess against the health of the business. We only very indirectly does market value assessment cover the health of the property market, but it doesn't. We wouldn't distinguish in our assessments the performance of a given business versus its neighbor next door, if I understand that correctly.
Yes, yeah.
So this is not data we would have access to, like the federal government, which has tax filing data and can apportion aid automatically or verify applications based on access to CRA filings. We don't have access to any of that to validate any of this, do we?
No, we don't have any income information, so absolutely it'd be based on the voluntary compliance and that we would have to trust the documents that are being provided to us.
Thank you. I'll take the chair back and go to Councillor Nicol.
Yeah, just to speak to it, although it's well-intentioned, I think the mayor is absolutely correct in the mechanical assessments of this kind of motion. It is just, it's impossible to do. We don't have access to the administration. We don't have, there's a question of fairness and equity with regards to what kind of business is where and how and so on. So it is better not to create a false expectation on a lot of administrative work, to be quite honest, on a program that I do not think will have the wherewithal to be applied. And so I can't support this, even though it's well-intentioned. But the mayor outlined very clearly some of the mechanical issues that just can't be played through. And frankly, I think the administration has enough on their plate right now. So I won't be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Councillor Banga?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe this motion is really something that I have been contacted several times over the last few months by folks whose businesses were seriously affected by what's going on, and especially not to single out one, but hospitality industry is probably one of the examples. And I know it's going to be pretty challenging to find out who really deserves and how much. And but I think those details have to be sorted out by administration. I know it's a lot of work, but their administration is telling us that they are able to somehow make it functionable. And if they can do it and they think they can do it, I think we should at least give it a shot and see what happens. So I'll support it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson?
Well, one of the things I hadn't thought about until I think it was mentioned is that the reality is for any business that, at best we'd be able to defer it to September. So for them to get the same effect, going on to monthly would actually give them a better advantage. I mean, there is another solution to this, which we already offer, correct? Which is to
Yeah, the monthly payment program is absolutely an option for property owners who feel they can't afford the lump sum payment.
And for businesses, because the idea that suddenly the economy is going to come bouncing back on September 1st, I think be nice to think, but I don't think it's going to kick that fast. So, to solve the problem we're trying to solve here, it strikes me we already have a solution that probably will work better for businesses, which is actually spreading their tax payments out over the full year, correct? That will probably give them a better advantage than deferring it for 3 months.
That's correct, and what we could do is offer to not charge fees to move to monthly.
I think that would be a better solution, so I don't know if Councillor Knack would be interested in exploring that instead, but it seems to me we already have a better tool. So right now there is a disincentive to do that because we charge them to shift. And what is that charge, just out of curiosity?
I think Mr.
It's going to be 2% of the outstanding payment. So if they join in February,
Right.
they have to make up the January and February payment, which they would have otherwise had to pay had they been on the program from the get-go. And then it's an added 2% administrative fee. So that fee it's linear, but it does increase the longer you wait to join the program.
Right.
And Councillor, I'm not opposed to anything, but that one is less administratively burdensome. That's something we can do without adding people to the tax collection.
And we could probably do it without doing a stress test on it as well.
That's correct, because then we wouldn't have to evaluate.
Just
We're not
anybody who
adding.
wanted to do it could do it. Yeah.
Correct.
All right, I think that it seems to me that's a better tool for the businesses, quite frankly, and I think otherwise we're holding out a carrot that is actually not going to be terribly helpful to them when we actually have a better tool. So I see that Councillor Knack's on the board, so I'd be interested to hear his thinking on that in terms of his motion.
Oh, you can ask him a question still. You're asking questions. You can ask him.
Councillor Knack, do you have any thoughts on that? It seems to me that might be a more useful tool for businesses.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable as a solution. So I'm open to making that change. Just something that we can do. So if yes.
Well, perhaps then maybe I should propose the amendment because Councillor Knack can't amend his own motion. That this be changed to for the administration to come back with. Instead of referral, I don't know how to word it. It would replace it with exploring waiving the fee for.
Yeah, it'd be an amendment to the fee bylaw, which is bylaw 12914.
Well, so my amendment would be to replace this motion then.
I can withdraw with the intent that would come forward.
Okay, well, then maybe I'll let you do it, Andrew, Councillor Knack, and I'll just stop talking and you can withdraw and remove. Then might be the best way to do it.
Well, yeah, having heard a will to withdraw and perhaps recraft, I'll just check now to see if there's any objection to withdrawal. Not hearing any, then, so the motion on the floor is withdrawn. So
I'll still defer to Councillor Knack to make the motion.
we'll reset. I'll go back to Councillor Knack if you want to put that with some different wording. Do clerks need a minute to confer on what the wording for that
I'm
would be?
happy to answer so I just wanted to triple check if the timing is still the same time to come back with the amendments to the bylaw at the end of May.
We can still do the same timing. Yeah, we're just amending the motion here as well.
Yeah, and just to confirm, that would come back directly to council?
Yeah, I think that's the intent. Time is of the essence. And I think we've had public input on this. I'm not sure we need to go get more. Folks are looking for help, so.
I've just shared the motion with the clerks.
Councillor Knack?
Yes, I'm just waiting to see the final wording. Oh, there, I think it's just popped up.
I'm just sending it to you.
Yeah, perfect. I think I have it here. The administration returned to City Council on May 17th, 2021 with options and criteria to amend bylaw 12914 to remove any fees to sign up for the monthly payment plan.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Councillor Henderson seconds that. Okay. Debate on that? I'll just click on and pass the chair to Councillor Henderson.
Mr. Mayor, I'm on.
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought the list had reset, but go ahead, Councillor McKean.
Well, I was just going to say that I would hope the report, while not a white paper, would detail some of the complexities in this whole realm. I've had, for example, live music venues reach out to my office with their absolute struggles. You cannot have live music venues open and haven't been able to during this whole pandemic. And the relief we can offer is really limited. So, and yet there seems to be, and I don't blame people, but this belief that somehow we have all this money available to us. And I think if the report explains a little bit about how if we do this, that impacts others. And that would be my only struggle with all of this, is that we need to tell true stories to the public about what tax deferrals do, which seems we maybe got out of that. But that was the only plea I wanted to make, Mr. Mayor, that the report come back and explain the difficulties we have in amending our tax policies, because somebody's got to pay for it. That was it. Thank you.
Good points, Councillor McKean. Councillor Essinger?
I just want some clarity, because the way the motion reads, it's for any fees, not just business. So is it meant to be just business, or now are we looking at removing fees for anyone that converts to a monthly payment plan?
Well, currently it reads all, and given that households may be in distress too, and it is beneficial to the city from a cash flow perspective ultimately to move as many accounts over as possible. I see Ms. Pearson nodding as I answer questions that are really in her bailiwick. So anyway, Ms. Pearson, why don't you address that question?
We did propose it for all. It is a consideration that we could do. Just for context, is if we do waive the fees for everyone, that's about $400K a year. So it is something that could benefit all taxpayers, and it is of benefit for the city to move people to the monthly payment plan.
Okay, that makes more sense. I wasn't sure of the cost magnitude, so that makes more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, if you could take the chair.
Will do.
I mean, just on that, there's probably some puts and takes against cash flow for us and the time value of money and so on and so forth. So hopefully that's something that can come out in the wash, but if it's a COVID impact for this year to do that, and we sort of eat that going forward, I'll look forward to that in the report. So the other question I had, though, is it says options and criteria to amend the bylaw. I think based on this discussion, we're ready to just ask for amendments to the bylaw. Would that be crisper?
I believe.
That's fine with us.
Okay. And then that wouldn't necessarily include Councillor McKean's point about the broader taxation context. And it's almost the assessment and taxation context, really. So we do have that white paper, and I'm sensitive to Councillor McKean's request for information on that, and I think maybe a memo or a briefing note or something might be more appropriate to help us answer questions to businesses about that. So and maybe we'd have that sooner too, because those questions are going to start to come to us. So I can't ask Councillor McKean a question, but I'll ask you, Mr. Corbould, whether, I think the spirit of Councillor McKean's request is partly so we can respond to the public who have questions about why can't the city just do this kind of relief for us. There are some things covered very well in those tax white papers that would help us answer that question, but compiling that for us as CAMs, I think, would be super helpful. Could you do that?
Yeah, we think we can do that without creating another white paper.
Awesome. Well, again, focusing it, so I'll just speak to this now. I think really focusing administrative effort on what we can do with the scarce resources and the lean capacity that we have is key. So I'm really happy to see, I think this is a really good example of the motion evolving thanks to good debate and Q&A, and I appreciate Councillor Knack's openness to reframing this. And I think the larger principle that has stood us in the right stead through this crisis among all orders of government is that the city has the least flexibility to absorb significant costs in our fiscal framework because we can't run deficits. And so we've had to make our own really, really difficult decisions. More than 1,000 people are still laid off right now as we speak. To try to balance our budget, which must balance every year regardless of a crisis like this. And we also have, the elegance of property tax is its simplicity in some ways, but it's also not a good proxy for what's happening in the economy in a given year, especially a year like this. And so I completely understand why ratepayers are looking to relief from the city, and that's, I think, why we've taken the measures today around BIA fees and taken the measures to constrain and flatten taxes for 2 years in a row for business, and that is what we can do, that is within our control. But that because we don't have access, as I mentioned earlier, to tax filing data to validate this, and because it would be extremely cumbersome for us to have to create a program, I think this is a very elegant solution for folks who are going to have cash flow issues and already have cash flow issues. And so we encourage people to move to the monthly if they're staring down the big bill for the end of June, beginning of July, against the economic circumstances that they face. But the city just doesn't have the right tools to provide the relief, and that's why we have advocated relentlessly to both the federal government and to some degree the provincial government to provide that targeted support to business in the form of the wage top-ups, in the form of the rent subsidies, all of the things that have given business a fighting chance, that come from the orders of government that can borrow in order to prop up the economy in a way that the city just can't. And so for us to do all this I know we're not debating the previous motion, but so I'll rein myself in there a little bit. But I think that those are constraints we need to be upfront with people about, and I appreciate the comms tools will help us answer some of those questions and keep our eye on the prize here of trying to support all of our taxpayers through this and all of our citizens through this really difficult time. So I'll leave it there, take the chair back. Anybody else before I go to Councillor Knack to close? Councillor Knack?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. First, I just want to make sure we say out loud what's been flagged by the clerks, which the bylaw number has been reflected to change to the one that we actually amended last year, just so everyone knows.
Okay, noted. Yeah, the bylaw number's been adjusted.
Yeah, thank you. And then, yes, I don't have much to add. And sorry, I realized it was imperfect and sort of felt a little bit last minute. And I was just trying to find the right time to have this conversation. For context, I referenced hoteliers because that's actually where this first initial push came from. There are, as mentioned, a number of hoteliers who are operating at most 10% capacity right now. And it's frustrating, and appreciating Councillor McKeon's points and your points you've just raised, Mr. Mayor, around there's other orders of government who should ideally be the ones to help. At the same time, when you're struggling and when you are at that point where a few dollars every month actually can make a difference, recognizing we're still got some time to get out of this, but for industries like that, which will continue in the future. It's not like people are going to stop traveling after we get through this. It is nice to be able to provide something. So I think this is a better way. So I appreciate, Councillor Henderson, your suggestion. This is a better solution that actually can then apply to more folks in an easier way. So thank you for bringing that forward, that idea forward, and thanks for all the comments on this, and thanks for administration's willingness to sort of react on the fly to that. So this should help. Won't be perfect, and the other orders of government might need to fill in, but I think it's a good way to help out. Every little bit will matter on the monthly side for some folks right now. So hope folks can support this now. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thanks, Councillor Katarina. Councillor.
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor Banga. Councillor Katarina, we've got yours, and Councillor Hamilton.
Yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Display the vote, please. And that's carried unanimously. Okay, last but not least is item 6.9. I suppose not that long ago we had a discussion at Executive Committee about this, and the recommendation was sent up from committee to proceed, but understanding that there would be likely some further debate on that here. We can, and it's the whole fee schedule that's here, so we should get that on the floor, and then if there are amendments to specific parts of it, then we can work through those specifically. But I'll just go to administration to see if there's presentation, any additional information or context for council. It was a good presentation. It may be valuable to get it.
Your Worship, we do have a revised presentation that
Sure.
speaks more to the topics that were discussed in regards to supports.
I think that'd be helpful, so go ahead.
Your Worship, members of council, as a follow-up from Executive Committee, we're requesting approval to add a new category to our approved fee schedule in order to reflect another support we're offering to Edmontonians through our Smart Fare payment system, which launches this fall. These supports are offered because of our redesigned fare policy, which was approved by council at the end of 2019. Last week, we heard from speakers at committee about the importance of supporting Edmontonians, including vulnerable transit users. We understand the need for supports to access transit service. You have, as a council, have made important changes to fares over the last few years by providing a number of different supports. In total, we have over 10 different supports provided for some of our transit users. We are leading the country in terms of the supportive measures we offer, and we also understand the importance of continuing to look for ways to support those user groups. Some of the examples include fare-free transit for seniors experiencing low income, fare-free transit for kids 12 and under, a low-income transit pass program with a sliding scale eligibility, as well as a sliding scale model for seniors. We have lower pricing for youth as well as for seniors, and we've expanded the day pass program for families up to 5 people. and also increase the number of free monthly passes for houseless Edmontonians up to 1,900 passes per month. In addition, last year we responded to the UPass suspension during COVID, providing temporary expansion to the Ride Transit program as well as the Youth Pass program to support the UPass users. Our fare policy enables these offerings, and we're talking today about new supports specifically related to the new smart fare category as well as fare capping. Again, we are leading in Canada for a fare policy that provides this level of support and is anchored in principles. We're adding a new category which enables further supports for users, basically a single trip fare in smart fare for card users. We're not proposing any other changes to the previously approved fare structure. The move to smart fare is supported by the fare policy in providing pricing rewards for more frequent users. The smart fare benefits includes, once a user hits their monthly cap, they will then ride for free for the rest of the month. In today's environment, a user would have to pay the upfront cost of a monthly pass, but in the smart fare environment, they can incrementally load their cards, which will benefit from fare capping when they reach the monthly fare limit. Smart fare launches in the fall, so we need this category change to incorporate now so we can plan and program the system properly. With that, we're happy to take any questions. We have Ms. Padbury present as well as Ms. Houghton McDonald on the call.
Thank you. I suppose we could do a round of questions before we get a motion on the floor, and that might adjust the motion, or we can take the motion and then ask questions and then see amendments. So we can go either way. I forget who had selected this, though.
I did.
Councillor Henderson? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, I have one question. I mean, I'm not keen on raising, we're coming up against the deadline against raising the cash fare. Understanding this is a debate that may happen again, but at minimum, it seems to me that doing this now, knowing that we're going to offer, if you use the smart card, a discounted fare when the smart card is available, at minimum, I think we should be holding off on raising the single fare until that smart card option is available. So I'm wondering what the implications of that would be. I don't know, I understand that we can't predict entirely when that smart card is going to be happening. I know we have a much clearer idea now than we did. But it seems to me, raising the cash fare now and then dropping it in September or whenever, when the smart card is available, seems to me as a cart before the horse kind of problem. So what would the implications of that be, of at least delaying the increase until we can get the smart card into people's hands? And then I fully support the idea of giving this discount if you have a smart card.
Perhaps I can ask Ms. Padbury to provide some of the specifics in terms of the dollar amounts with the deferral.
So Councillor Henderson, if you deferred that out till implementation of smart fare of September 1st, you'd be looking for around another $224,000 revenue reduction this year.
Well, to cut to the chase, at minimum, I'd be prepared to move that. I think that otherwise we're putting it up before we can actually give people the advantage here. So that would be my position. Whether or not somebody wants to go further and defer that increase longer is another question. But that's my feeling is we should not be doing that until the smart card is available. So I don't know if it's possible to move it with that provision in there.
I second that.
Just to be clear, that would be moving an amended schedule so it would still go up later in the year, but it would be
at minimum, I think we should be deferring this question until smart card's available, at minimum. And if somebody feels, I'm not keen on raising it at all, but I think.
Well, since we don't have a firm time or a number for that just yet, and the time affects the number, I think the motion's not quite in order yet. But so what I'm going to suggest is, again, a few more questions, and then come back to a motion once a scenario is worked up and there's some wording. I can come back to you for that.
Okay. Well, if I could ask administration to then think of how I could word that as a motion, that would be very helpful.
We can take that away.
The tricky thing is pinning it to smart card timing.
Well, and that's why maybe it should be, I mean, I don't know what the implications would be of actually pushing it to the next SOBA in the fall. I mean, that would be, if that's cleaner and simpler, I don't know what the added cost would be. I'm guessing it'd be another 200,000, roughly, give or take, if we pushed it to November.
I think Harm has the answer. One of the questions I have is the one-time funding would be assuming that the fare does go up as approved in the budget next year as well. So that's when it's...
Right, so you get a double bump next year. But by that point, the chances of having of being able to get a single fare at a much better price with a smart card would exist. Not probably.
Correct.
Very likely. I hate to say, I don't want to jinx it. All right, well, I'll wait to hear others' thoughts on this, but that I think is yeah, okay, thanks.
Councillor Knack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that was going to, I think, so the question is, if we waited until February 1st next year to make a change, we have to offset the budget by $473,000 additionally, because we already did 200,000 during the fall 2020 budget, correct? Is that how I read this second chart?
That's correct, Councillor Knack. So if you deferred the increase out to February 1st of next year, it'd be $473,000 you're looking for.
Okay, I think that would at a minimum be the right solution, but I'll wait for Councillor Henderson to move that and then talk about it. Then I do have a few other questions. What did we, these are some questions I asked last time we didn't yet have the numbers, so I wanted to follow up. Curious how much we budgeted. So if we take that whole amount of all cash fare total, not just the projected increase, what did we project to have by March 31st of this year, and what have we actually recovered for cash fare?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Mr. Ryan is on the call, and he looks at our revenue analysis, so I'd like to defer to him.
Perfect.
Yeah, so for cash fares, we had budgeted about 1.4, a little under 1.5 million, and collected as of March year to date was 1.3 million.
Okay, so that's what we've, so we're relatively close on that. Okay. The other question I had related to the conversation that we had about encouragement to move people into smart fares. So the way I understood our conversation last week, and sorry to be stubborn on this, is that the intent of making that difference and having a difference is to encourage people to move to smart fare. So do we have a number, a percentage of the existing cash paying customers, which I think accounts for currently 12% of our customers, how many of those would then be moving to smart fare because of this change?
Thank you, Councillor. We wouldn't have an estimate of how many will transition over. We could undertake that research. I would say one of the core principles in the fare policy was about rewarding with the intention of alignment with smart fare and providing extra rewards for those that are more frequent users of the system.
Mm-hmm. And so the reason I asked that though, because if we accomplished our objective and moved all 12% over to cash paying customers or to smart fare paying customers, then we'd also have a separate budget conversation, because then we wouldn't be collecting any cash fare. So if we hit our end goal, we want to move 100% people over. Correct? That's our final goal. We'd love to see that.
I would say in an ideal but unlikely scenario, yes. Mm-hmm. There will always be, from an equity perspective, people using cash. So whether they're visitors, whether they're just like really infrequent users, I don't think we'll ever see a scenario where we move completely away from it.
Yes, that was my thought too. So I guess then going back to that, so the question from last week or whenever we talked about it last, if we expect that there will still be a percentage of customers that continue to use cash, do we have a pretty, and I don't think we necessarily had a complete answer last time, but I think that's due to lack of data, but we don't know who those people are who will still be continuing to use cash. We would make assumptions. I would make an assumption that it'd be seniors that are maybe a little less technically savvy. There might be other groups like that, but that we don't actually know who would make up those remaining cash paying customers, correct?
That is correct. We haven't undertaken that research, but it would be fairly straightforward for us to do it. Should that be the will of council, we can undertake that.
Yeah, because I think that's really important when we're then talking about this, because I appreciate, I'm speaking to it. No, I've stopped, and I'll speak to it when there's an actual motion on the floor. Thank you.
That's excellent, excellent self-governance there. Councillor Knack. Councillor Nicol is next.
Thank you. Just some clarification with regards to the fee schedule sheet in the footnotes. At the very end, it says non-cash fares increase of approximately 2% per year for 2021 and 22 has been included to address increase in service delivery costs from into transit. Cash fare increases in each of 2019 to 21 has been included to more closely align to the anticipated maximum fare payable in regional smart fare collection. Then it says the fare rate increases for 21-22 have been put on hold pending further review by council. You want to talk me through that mechanics, because it almost sounds like it contradicts itself.
Thank you, Councillor, for that point. Mr. Ryan prepared the fee schedule with finance, so I'd like to ask him to explain that footnote, please.
So the cash fares have been, the original plan was to have the cash fares move up by 25 cents per year from 2019 through 2021. And that has been, through actions of council, that has been delayed on a few occasions where we did proceed with the 2021 or the 2019 fare rate increase. The 2020 fare rate increase in cash was paused, and looking at it going back to the schedule that was approved by council, at least the ending point of having a $4 cash fare by the end of the 2019 through 2022 budget cycle. So this is trying to maintain the ending point that was originally approved in the 2019 through 2022 budget, just dealing with the timing differences.
Okay, Mr. Ryan, okay, you've spoken to the cash fares, but right on top it says non-cash fare increases. Have they been put on hold pending further review?
The non-cash fare increases for plan for 2021 and 2022 are proceeding as they were approved in last fall's supplementary operating budget adjustment meeting. So the 2021 non-cash fare increases did take place February 1st, 2021, with the exception of youth passes, which traditionally go into the market in September. And based on the decisions that were made at Fall SOBA, we are planning to proceed with the 2022 fare rate changes as laid out in the schedule.
So, Mr. Ryan, what I'll do, and through Mr. Robar and through Mr. Corbald, I'll send you an email to get some clarification around that, because I'm still a little confused as to the actual cascading, what's going what, where, when. But that's okay. I don't want to consume up too much of council's time here. And the last, there's a top footnote run under flat fare is the pay-as-you-go rate per trip for all trips made in the month until cap value is reached. Can you give me some clarification on that? Cap value is reached.
So if we take the standard or the adult fare as an example, so the monthly cap would be $100. So what would happen is that every trip that was taken would be charged $3 into the individual's transit account until the value of travel for that month reached $100, at which point there would be no further charges on a per trip basis for that transit user.
I guess what I'm getting at, Mr. Ryan, and to Mr. Corbald and to Mr. Robar is a concern of moving fares over, a period of 18 months and so on, creating customer confusion and consternation for the department and administration. This is an issue because is that going to happen? Because it seems like we have a lot of moving parts here. Does that mean a changing fee schedule over the next 24 months? Do you follow what I'm saying?
There will, with the phased implementation of Smart Fare, there will be definitely a communication marketing challenge to make sure that individual transit users understand how to use the new Smart Fare system, and also what that means for how they will be charged and how their transit usage will come back to them.
Then you can make it quick. So I have a whole suite of customers that are going to come and get some passes. And so 1 month it's going to be this, and then next month it's going to be that, and third month it could be something different?
No, the plan would be we move away from paper passes to a flat rate fare with capping, and that is it for that. So that customer segment will move one time only from existing paper-based to the Smart Fare system, and it'll be on a phased implementation. So each customer segment will move once, only once.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I go to Councillor Henderson for a motion? Did you have more questions, Councillor Henderson, or are you good to go? All right.
I think I'm good to go. I don't actually have a final number, but the motion I'm going to make would be, I think the clerk has it without the final number.
We did, but I got direction or feedback that I'm not sure that it's totally accurate, so I'm not sure.
No, on the dollar figure.
That the amendment as per.
Well, I'm seeing huddling happening around the numbers, so I'm going to suggest we take 5 minutes and just allow administration and Councillor Henderson and clerks to all be on the same page rather than craft it on the fly here. So unless there's any objection, let's take a quick 5-minute pause. To stall for time here and just make sure we've got everybody back on. Councillor Nickel?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Walters?
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Banga?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Carmel?
I'm here.
Councillor Katarina?
Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Zadok?
Here.
Councillor Essinger?
Present.
Councillor Hamilton?
Hello.
Councillor Henderson, I can see again, and he has a piece of paper in front of him now, which is encouraging. Councillor Knack?
Good morning.
Good morning. And Councillor McKean?
Still here.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Henderson?
I'm here. Sorry, was that what you were asking? Or
No, I'm going to, I've already assumed your attendance and now inviting you to put something on the floor
Okay.
if you're satisfied with it.
Here is my motion, that the Edmonton Transit Service Branch revenue budget be reduced by $473,000 on a one-time basis in 2021 and January 2022 to defer the budgeted cash transit fare increase of $375 from May 1st to February 1st in 2022, funded by a transfer from the Financial Stabilization Reserve.
Seconded by Councillor Paquette. Okay. And
So-
does that also amend the fee schedule? And which order do we want to do these two things in?
I was going to move that, the whole fee schedule with that as an amended piece was my intent.
I think that was the intent, was
Yeah.
the fee schedule subject to this change,
Yeah.
funded from that source for that time on a one-time basis. So that's the intent. I think we can carry on knowing that that's the intent, is the underlying recommendation with this change is what's been put on the floor and seconded by Councillor Paquette. Okay, go ahead and introduce it, Councillor.
Yeah, and I debated whether or not, because I think probably September 1st would be dicey in terms of and I do think there's a larger question that ultimately will have to be dealt with, but I think it's more appropriate to deal with it for the next council to deal with it, and I'm not just punting it forward. We know more now than we did at Christmas time, which is why we deferred it till now. We have some space and some room here that is allowing us to do something. And the numbers are different, actually, from what they thought they were going to be at Christmas time. So I think a number of things will be understood. I think there's a much bigger question that probably still needs to be debated around this. But I recognize that by then we should have a single cash fare available to people using the smart card, which is much more affordable than this. Rather than trying to tie it to an unknown of when that's going to be available, it just seemed to me this was the safer time and date to use. I also think it responds well to the very specific situation we have right now in terms of COVID and the use on our transit. I don't think this is a time to be making it less attractive to use transit. So I think there's a second reason for delaying this and deferring it. And I think, there are going to be some hard questions that need to be asked about the long-term future of our fares again, which I think will pop up because of this. But I think that's more appropriately debated, quite frankly, by the next council than this one. And this, I think, so this achieves a number of things. It means that we'll have more information when this question comes back up again about what to do in the future. It really is one time that can respond to our COVID situation right now and also respond to the fact that we do not have the smart card option available to us, which will make for an affordable single fare, which I think probably is a more appropriate way to do it. So anyway, and I do completely support the idea that I think is in the basis of the overall motion, which is creating a smart car single fare and another fare that actually will hopefully make single use and the use of our transit much more accessible to people, and some of the people I think we're most wanting to sort of help with this. So I support the basis of the original piece, but I just think that our single fare should be deferred, knowing that what we're also approving here is a better way to handle single fares in general.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Knack.
Just speaking to it, I don't know if anyone has questions first.
Let me check and see if there are questions before we get into further debate on it. Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Essinger, do you have questions?
I do.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton, go ahead.
This is for administration. There's a rate increase proposed, as I understand, in 2022 to $4. Does this mean that in February or March of next year, council will be debating increasing fares from $3.50 to $4 instead of having that stepping stone of $3.75?
Councillor, that's correct.
Okay, so we could be in having a similar conversation a year from now should some people around this table be returning. And we might be at that time having a discussion about what you'd call sort of a rate cliff, that the rates were so low for so long and now we're trying to catch up, correct?
It could be viewed that way, certainly.
All right. And I guess then to Councillor Henderson, how would you, I know that you're referencing future conversations about cash fares, but we could find ourselves back here in 8 or 9 months having the same conversation about the rate cliff on cash fares.
I would say the one thing that will be different then is you will know that there will be a single fare available if we pass what is passed today, which will be a $3 single fare if you use your smart card. So that's something that is not available now. We don't entirely know when it's going to be available. That's why originally I was going to try and tie this to the smart card being available, but I think that's clumsy and probably is less clear. But the idea of a cliff at that point, it'll be a different kind of cliff, and there'll be a lot more information to work with around what that cliff looks like when we know that the smart card is in people's hands. And this motion also approves the $3 single fare for single use for the smart card.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you for that. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Nicol, did you have questions or to speak?
Yeah, just a question to the chair. As I read the motion, this would be an approval of the entire fee schedule with one vote, not an amendment?
It would be approval of the fee schedule as amended by the part 2. So the motion could be split if there was a desire to...
No. I just wanted to be clear on all, if it was all at once. Yep. That's all I was curious about. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson moved it holus bolus, as they say.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm done. Councillor Knack?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the motion, Councillor Henderson. So I'll support this, and I just wanted to flag some of the additional comments for the next conversation at the next and some of that information that I think the next council needs. And here's my struggle is that I would actually argue our cash fare is not too low. It's already way too high. And that's no fault of anyone. It's the fault of a variety of different things in a system that was designed to not be the most efficient. But don't forget that even at $3.50, we're one of the highest cash fares in Canada. And my worry is that's still the number that most people see up front, and therefore make their decisions related to that instead of knowing about these other pieces. And my hope is when we get into smart fare and we can really start promoting that will be there. But there's a few things that I think the next council really needs, which is that how many of the 12% of Edmontonians currently paying cash would move over? Because if the answer is 1% or 2%, then there's a question. And then the follow-up is who is still then paying cash fares and why are they paying cash fares? Because there's an equity piece that I'm still really worried about. I understand the intent of wanting to have a differential fare to incent people to move to cash or to smart fare. That makes perfect sense. That is a good business principle to provide incentive. But if there are folks who just can't because of either technology reasons or because of reasons of their life, one has to ask, should we have a differential fare? If there are reasons that actually prevent someone from doing that, then maybe we need to think about actually keeping them equitable and hope that the improved service and the increased convenience is reason enough to make that switch for those who can. So I don't think there's enough information, and I hope that information comes back so that the next council can have a real conversation, because I am very worried about the notion of going to a $4 cash fare, recognizing that there's a $3 flat fee that's going to be approved in this, which is, I think, the right approach. I just think everyone should have access to the same flat fee, no matter their circumstances. And because we don't have enough data, I can only base it off my anecdotal experiences, and that includes even conversations this past weekend with a number of different older couples who still have vehicles, who talked about how transit, and this topic came up because it was in the news, and how they said, well, because we still drive, we wouldn't even consider using transit if it was $4 or $3.75. They even have a tough time justifying $3.50 because of the fact that they're on a fixed fare. And yes, you would argue that if you didn't have a vehicle, you would save the money that is, you would experience in insurance and all these other things. But these are folks who are still in that camp, if you will, and aren't just going to give up their vehicle. So we just have to think about that message and the information that we need to help address that. So I'll support this with great hesitancy, because it still actually then allows us to go up to $4 on February 1st next year. And I think the next council needs far more information to really justify why that should be the case. And I think the final piece of information we need, because we talk about it, and it has come up in different times, these fair conversations have arisen around how that would affect ridership, how every increase of 25 cents or 50 cents negatively increases or brings down ridership. And again, what is our primary goal with the system? If you can get more riders, more paying riders at a lower fare, and have the same cost recovery, that is a better overall and a longer term win for the city than having fewer riders. We still end up recovering, and this is making assumptions. What if we're recovering the same overall amount with fewer riders because of a higher fare versus more riders because of a lower fare? I don't think we still have enough of that data to make an informed decision. And I think our goal needs to be, what is going to drive up ridership beyond the 13%, along with the changes we've already made, and fare plays an important role in that. So this is the right decision right now, with a plea to have more detail around who makes up that remaining group and what message that sends to all Edmontonians about using the transit system. And I think the smart fare will really encourage folks. I'm just a little worried about the other side of the factor here. So I'll support this, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Essinger?
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Henderson for the part 2 of the motion. I'm happy to support this. I think when we did the first deferral of it until May, we were hopeful that we'd be out of the pandemic and we were getting back to business as usual, but we're not. We're in the midst of a third wave. We're still moving forward. Limited people are using transit. My hope is that we can increase ridership as we move forward. And I think this is one area that we might be able to gain some. We talked earlier about taxes and supporting people facing economic times. Many of those using our transit are facing challenges. So I think this is a natural discussion at this time, and that we should do it. I think the discussion we have next year when it comes back will be, as Councillor Knack indicated, discussion around the fairness around the smart card. Well, we're not there yet. So at this time in our history, I think this is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicol, can you take the chair?
I have the chair, sir. I'm just not fast on my buttons here. I apologize.
No worries, no worries. So a couple of thoughts, and some of you know I've had occasion to think about transit fare policy since before I worked here, so it's been quite a ride, so to speak. But I fundamentally agree with Councillor Essinger, and I've had some time to think about this since the discussion at committee last week. In the COVID context, and especially in this third wave here, and staring down continued depressed ridership and depressed revenue, that first and foremost from a COVID resiliency and COVID recovery standpoint of respecting the challenges people are facing. I think just as we've done for BIAs earlier, that some targeted relief here makes sense. I do think also the particular arguments about the timing related to smart card coming in are valid, and bridging to that is persuasive to me. I was sort of going in that direction at committee, but needed to know what the impacts were going to be. But was also very concerned about this council trying to revisit the fare policy itself, which I still support. And that fare policy emphasizes strategic discounting to support vulnerable populations and to incent the strategic growth of ridership over time. And particularly by incenting subscribers and repeat users as a very deliberate focus. So that is the policy that this council has, I think, unanimously adopted. And some of what has been described or contemplated, and much of what has been proposed to us in abundant correspondence from the public, is a very, very different approach, a very different strategy, and a very different policy. And I think that unless we want to revisit all of that at this point, which clearly there is some political will and public desire to do, that I think this bridges us through COVID recovery to a point where council can have that conversation and manage the trade-offs accordingly later this year and into the next. And it is a perfectly valid decision for a council to say that they want to take a different approach to the fare policy. That's a legitimate discussion to have. But I hope that it won't lose the low-income bus pass that we brought in, which 22,000 people already use and depend on, who get that support. As a matter of fact, yesterday, someone drew to my attention that British Columbia has made transit free for 12 and under across the province, and asked me, when are you going to do that in Edmonton, Iverson? And the answer is 3 years ago is when we did that. I'm proud of the work that we've done there. And I think that rewarding subscribers makes sense. I think thinking through the equity and diversity and inclusion dimensions of how do we make sure that occasional users of the system in vulnerable populations who don't even want to buy the smart card the low income, the ride transit program, can easily get a smart card. And if maybe that even helps them with micro bankability. I think that there are upsides to this digitization and virtualization that the city can assist with. Maybe we can work with Four Directions Financial, ATB's social enterprise bank, for people who are otherwise difficult to bank. I think that there has to be a better answer than making it cheaper for everybody who's just hopping on once in a while. But if council wishes to do that in the future and wishes to pass that cost along to the other folks who are paying for it and make that case, that's, again, a perfectly valid decision. But I do think the strategic, selective, targeted, and equity-driven approach to supporting people in our fare policy is one I continue to support. That said, I think in this case, buying some time for the next council to hear from the public through the democratic process and have that discussion in earnest, and then make decisions accordingly. We may well find that the price signal we want to send, the sticker shock signal, wants to be something different than $4 next year. I can see a case for that, particularly in the levers discussion we talked about in the city plan not that long ago on the transportation side. So very valid discussion to be had in due course. In the meantime, this makes sense to help bridge us to that. So I'll support it.
I'll return the chair.
Thank you. Anyone else before I go to Councillor Henderson to close? Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Knack. I think there is a larger discussion here, but it's not one we can have right now. Our window to have the larger discussion, which has ongoing implications, was last November. And we all remember, the unknowns of that, and why having the larger discussion at that time in that context was very difficult to have. I have to hope that larger context and that larger discussion and the information that we'll have in front of us in the fall will give a much clearer idea of what the real trade-offs are in terms of that long-term question of what transit fares should be. For us to have that now, we don't really have the ability to do those kind of, to do something that's going to have ongoing implications. But we are still very much in a kind of one-time existence in a one-time world, and I think this allows us to make that one-time decision, to hold off on something that I think could hurt people quite badly, and allow the longer discussion to happen at a time when I think there will be a lot more information. It's not about punting it forward. I wish I was there for that discussion, because I think I have always felt, as Councillor Knack has, that our transit fares are probably too high, but the only way to bring them down is to have implications on other revenues and other expenses, and that's a much deeper conversation that I wish I was here for in the fall, but I won't be. So I think this is not about presuming how that conversation is going to go, but I think it is still very much about responding to a very specific situation that we have right now. To the fact that we don't have the better option, which is the smart card option, available to us yet, and that there will hopefully be space for a new council with a fresh mandate to think deeply about what they want to do with this and whether or not they want to make adjustments and changes. And they will have the tools to do that we don't have right now. So this motion is a stopgap. I recognize that, and I look forward to being able to listen in on how the next council deals with the larger question, which I think has been brewing and bubbling away for years. But I think this hopefully will allow us to get through to a place where we will have a lot more information and can have a conversation about these ratios in a far less stressed time. Both stresses on us and on our budgets, and stresses on the public and where they're at. So I'm hoping people can support this. And I look forward to being able to listen to the further conversation in the fall in a very different milieu, I hope.
Please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thanks, Councillor Caterina.
Yes, for me as well, please.
Thanks, Councillor Banga.
Yes, for me as well.
Thanks, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Paquette?
Oh, it's coming through, but yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, my screen's gone to sleep here. I'm a yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Display the vote. That's carried 12-1. Okay. Are there any notices of motion today? Not hearing any. Then with all of 13 minutes to spare, you get the rest of your morning back. Thank you, everyone. This council meeting is adjourned.